This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Nam.
And I'm Jamal Dajani.
Jamal, we have a great show today. There's, as usual, a lot to cover. We're not going to be covering the royal wedding today, just to let our viewers and listeners know, but there was a big wedding in Jordan that brings together the Jordanian and the Saudi royal families together. We may get to that at another show, but not today. Today, we're going to be covering kind of this international uproar around Roger Waters' concerts in Berlin and in Germany. There's been a concerted effort to smear him. As many people know, Roger Waters has been an active social justice kind of leader and campaigner, especially for self-determination for Palestinians. He's given a series of concerts in Germany that have drawn the ire of the pro-Israel groups in Europe and beyond. We're also going to talk a little bit about a new report that was released, just extraordinary story about how Israel was recruiting Nazi criminals to serve as Mossad agents. It's an incredible story, Jamal. We'll be covering that in the show. But before we get there, we're going to be speaking with, or rather, we're going to watch a video that you did interviewing Israeli journalist Oren Ziv, discussing his recent article in the 972 magazine. After backlash, conference drops Israeli archaeologists for settlement university ties. It's an incredible interview, Jamal. It's kind of keeps with the theme of the kind of oppressive nature of the apartheid state, not only against Palestinians, but basically against anybody that goes against their dominant oppressive regime. So we got a lot to cover today.
Well, yeah, we got a lot to cover. And just a quick intro to Oren's interview. I mean, not only that these archaeologists who are the subject of the interview violate international law by working in, occupied territories and digging, basically, in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, but also weaponizing Israel is weaponizing archaeology to fit into the biblical narrative. And many of its stories did not materialize. Anyway, let's watch Oren Ziv. The International Congress on the Archaeology of the Ancient Near East, ICANN, a very prestigious forum, held its 13th biannual gathering this May in Copenhagen. Scholars come to present from respected universities worldwide. However, the academic affiliation of two presenters, Professor David Ben Shlomo and doctoral student Yair El-Makias, was notably absent. Both represent the Department of Land of Israel Studies and Archeology at Ariel University. Ariel University is an Israeli settlement university built on occupied Palestinian land, which is where excavations are conducted as well. When other archaeologists noticed this, they contacted ICANN asking it to cancel both lectures. They cited the 2013 decision of the World Archaeological Congress, stating that it is unethical for professional archaeologists and academic institutions to conduct professional archaeological work and excavations in occupied areas possessed by force. Joining us on Arab Talk this week is Oren Ziv. In his May 28 article in the publication Plus 972 entitled After Backlash, Conference Drops Israeli Archaeologists for Settlement University Ties, he describes Israel's increasing violation of international law in supporting excavations on the Palestinian land it occupies. Mr. Ziv is an Israeli news and photojournalist for Local Call, as well as the publication Plus 972. He is also a founding member of Active Stills Photography Collective. Welcome to Arab Talk, Oren.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Tell us about the ICANN conference and the result of the complaint by the archaeologists about presenters from the settlement institution, Ariel University.
Thank you. So we got some information regarding this story because it's really unique that such an important conference like this one or similar invite officially members of Ariel University. It's the only Israeli university in the West Bank, but in general, Israeli researchers that do excavations or archaeological work in the West Bank. Because these kinds of conference should work according to the international law and of course, according to the international law and also the guidelines of some archaeologists. It's forbidden to do this kind of work in occupied land. And it's important to note that the conference itself doesn't boycott Israel completely. It means, or at all, it means the members of different universities from Haifa, Beersheba, Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv arrive to the conference, and even members of the Israeli Antique Authority come and present their findings every 2 years when it takes place. And also members, as far as I understand, members of Ariel University can come as guests, as listeners. Nobody check where do you live when you register the conference. But from the sources we got and the people we talk, it's very unique. They invite people of Ariel University to speak. Well, Ariel University is widely boycotted around the world, even in places that don't boycott entirely Israel or are not part of the BDS movement. And I think what shows the fact that even the organizers understood this is a problematic issue is that the affiliation of the two speakers from Ariel University were not mentioned in the bylines, in the abstracts. And I talked to different experts and they say it's very rare because even if you're not from your university, usually your work will be affiliated with some organization or university or, it's not kind of work you usually do by yourself as a freelance. It has to be coordinated with the state and with other authorities. And I think the fact that Ariel University was not mentioned on the program, it's because they understood this will cause some backlash. And of course it did. And Dr. Ben Shlomo, his talk was cancelled a few days before. And Dr. Ant El-Makayas, his talk was not cancelled. One explanation can be, and it's only an assumption, that Dr. Ben Shlomo actually does excavations on the ground, taking out things from occupied territories from the Iron Age near Jericho in the southern Jordan Valley in the occupied West Bank, while Dr. Ant El-Makayas researchers water systems and other things that I don't think he actually does digging on the ground. That could be one explanation, although we didn't get a confirmation to that from the organizer.
I'd like to note that Professor Shlomo stated that his lecture was removed not because of ethical or legal violations. This is I'm quoting here,
because of pressure in Europe.
Yeah, but he also says this is because one of the conference organizers is based at the Archeology Institute in Damascus. I mean, does this make any sense to you?
I don't think so. I think in the beginning, the archaeologists that were protesting against this thing focused in Dr. Ben Shlomo because he's more famous and his work is more famous. And I think only later they discovered there's a second person. So I think the protest movement was focusing on him in the beginning, and this is his reason his lecture is cancelled. It's important to know that at the conference they're telling us that they don't invite people submit their work and then they're chosen, and only after it's kind of a work process, so only after the conference they decide what will be included and what won't be included. I think it's an interesting explanation, but to be honest, I don't think it's the full story because till now, it never happened. Ariel University exists for quite some years, and they're never been invited officially to this kinds of conference. And this is why also the protest started, because people were surprised. This is kind of a red line in archaeology to invite, and not only from Palestine, also from other areas where there's occupation and there is a land dispute. Not that I like this term, but places that it's unethical to dig in.
So let me make sense of this. The conference usually invites people, so they have to submit a publication, and it gets reviewed, and then because of this, they get invited to present it.
Yeah.
And so both Professor Shlomo and Yair El-Makias were initially allowed to come to present until complaints arrived about their presentation because of the work. And then the other thing is the logic, that you talked about, that Dr. Shlomo worked in the West Bank, and his digs were in the West Bank versus the doctoral student who did not.
The doctoral student does research the West Bank, but from my understanding, he's not digging. He's researching finding that already exists. He's not taking out things. Although a short Google search on his name on El-Makais shows and present that he was involved in a project where earth and dirt were taken from the West Bank, from our area actually near Nablus, that is under Palestinian control, area B, according to the Oslo Accords, and taken illegally into a settlement, into a center that he mentioned, and there they did some research on the land. So
just to clarify, you're referring to an ancient amulet whose origin is disputed. He discovered from a dig in the mount of Ebal site, which is near Nablus, right? That's the case that you're referencing?
Yes, this happened last year, and basically Israeli and American archaeologists entered the site with any coordination with the Palestinian Authority or any Palestinians, and took quite a few piles or containers of dirt and earth, and then did the research and the excavation in a nearby settlement. And El-Makais was involved in this, according to different articles and according to his own Facebook page.
So isn't it ethically, never mind legally, problematic to parse the origin of an excavation to allow El-Makais to participate?
Oh, definitely. Both of them are part of the Ariel University, as you can see, they're both involved in work in the West Bank that is against international law. Obviously, I think if we can look at the bigger picture, it's part of our ongoing attempt of Ariel University, but also other institutions in the state of Israel, to do kind of a de facto annexation, to get accepted to international conferences or bodies or wherever, and slowly get recognition or de facto, de facto to get accepted. And I think it's kind of strange also, talking to different academics and experts, it's kind of strange that a researcher will give up his affiliation, because both the researcher and the institution need the name to get donations or cooperation or anything. The credit is very important when you go to a conference for the institution. In the end of the year, I guess, the people who do the funding or the advertising, they want to show in how many conferences they took part, especially in such an important conference. And in my opinion, and this is my interpretation, the fact they're giving up the affiliation from their side, not from the organizing side, means that it's more important for them to put, to step in slowly, and maybe in 2 years or 4 years, they can also have proudly their name. El-Makais, by the way, told me when I texted him that there's no story, because he said we were accepted and we're presenting with our name and this is a success. So from their side, it's happening slowly, and they have the patience for it. I think what is interesting is that till now, international bodies and international conference would reject completely this type of cooperation or acceptance. Doesn't matter if they're invited or they submit. It's the same thing in the end of the day.
This omission of the affiliation of Professor Shlomo and El-Makias with Ariel University on the conferences program caught the attention of Dr. Boyd, an archaeologist and the co-director of the Center for Palestine Studies at Columbia University. He wrote that he thinks that the omission of the affiliation with Ariel University by ICANN was deliberate. I mean, that's his opinion, that it was deliberate to avoid outcry in the archaeological field. What's your opinion on this?
I tend to agree. I think if you go through the program, which is hundreds of pages, so you see Haifa University and Tel Aviv University and Jerusalem University and Beersheba University, and even researchers from the Israeli Antique Authority that don't do excavation in the West Bank, only inside Israel 48. And I think it was on purpose, because if you'd see Archeology University, it's something that, it would pop up. It's something that people in general, but for sure experts and researchers on the field, it's something they're not used to see. I think it's important to know that nowadays there is kind of a separation, that the Israeli Antique Authority is in charge of what happens inside Israel 48 regarding archaeology, and in the West Bank, because it's not officially annexed by Israel, the civil administration that is under the Israeli military is responsible for archaeological issues and for all the sites. And now with the new extreme right government, with Otzma Yehudit, by Minister Ben Gvir and his allies, they want to change it. And when we're talking about slow annexation, maybe not that slow, one of the demands of the settlers is to have the Israeli Antique Authority in charge of the West Bank, because they say the military doesn't deal with it well and so on, and they want to have a complete control over this issue. And of course, through that, they can continue a de facto annexation, like things that we saw in Eival Mountain could happen officially every day. I think for the Israeli institutions, and I'm talking for their point of view from the universities and the researchers, this separation that kind of is still happening nowadays, although it's I don't really believe in it. I don't think this separation really exists on the ground, but this official separation is very important for the Israeli institutions inside Israel, because they can continue to go to this kind of conference. It's important to note, and this is not my personal opinion, I think it's what would happen if the Israeli Antique Authority would be responsible also for the West Bank. It will be kind of one body. Also, the whole authority and maybe also other institutions inside Israel will be boycotted, or at least not invited, because they will be involved in this illegal excavations in the West Bank. There won't be this separation.
Well, I mean, it is well known that archaeology is highly politicized by Israel to shore up its legitimacy, and you've mentioned this. Participating in these prestigious conferences only serves to further validate its occupation of the land. In fact, they don't like to use the word occupation. It just basically validates the annexation of the land. But would you think, in academia, there are limits, just like we have in medicine, right? That now we're seeing a professor and someone who wants to be a professor, a doctoral student, risking their reputation to further Israeli policies.
Yes, definitely. I think already Ariel University is highly politicized because it's located in the West Bank, because it's on occupied land, and because in very wide circles, it's not accepted internationally. So I think for those researchers who anyway do the work in the West Bank and are living, from what I understand, in the West Bank, they're part of the settlement movement, I don't think it risks their reputation. They're trying to push their agenda and to get international recognition. That in Israel they have no problem. Ariel University is highly accepted in Israel. It's funded by the government. They can participate inside Israel in every conference they want, also inside Israel, not only in the West Bank. I think it does show an interesting element that despite the fact that I'm talking not specifically about these two people, but in general, the settlement movement always reject the international law and the international opinion and the international pressure, it's still important for them to get some international recognition. So it's kind of interesting to see that on one hand, they reject the pressure from outside, even from allies of Israel, like the US and other countries that are worried from what's happening in the West Bank under the extreme new right-wing government. On the other hand, they're still going to these international bodies and looking for some kind of recognition, professionally or politically. And I think it's the same.
There are many instances of excavations in Israel seeking verification for biblical history, right? We've seen many of those. It's been observed. The findings are often forced to fit a pre-written narrative. One example is the destruction of the last orchard in Silwan on a Palestinian property to uncover the mythical ancient Siloam pool in the city of David. Up till now, I think nothing was found. Is there pushback within the more rigorous archaeological field in Israel against this?
There's an organization called Emek HaShaveh, the Equal Valley, that is active in Silwan, specifically in occupied Jerusalem, but also in other areas, to promote kind of more ethical archaeology. And what they say, and it's worth for the listeners and the viewers to check their website, they say it's okay, there are different narratives in archaeology, but it's not okay that Israel is using archaeology to raise other narratives, Christian, Muslim, or for sure Palestinian narratives, in order to fit it to a specific political agenda. So they don't deny a Jewish history on the land, but they say that Israel does a use in its history to grab more land, to build more settlements. Specifically, we see it around the Jerusalem Old City and the surrounding neighborhoods, as you said, in Silwan and other places. So it's definitely worth to check the website.
Yeah, I think I've looked at it, and you quote Alon Arad, head of Emek HaShaveh, which is again an Israeli NGO working to defend cultural heritage rights and to protect ancient sites as public assets. He states, if members of Israel's archaeological community want to be part of the international professional community, they need to operate according to the rules and ethics of archaeology. Well, what are Israel's future plans for sovereignty over antiquities?
I think under the Ben Gvir and Smotrich government, we will see new attempts for archaeology to take over the lands or side, and it doesn't matter if it's officially under the Israel Antique Authority or through the civil administration that is under the military, but the Minister Smotrich, Finance Minister Smotrich, is also a minister in the Defense Ministry and is directly responsible for the civil administration. So unfortunately, I think we'll see ongoing attempts and growing attempts to use archaeology and other methods just for annexation and grab land.
I mean, do you think this is part and parcel of what we're seeing today, an increased incursions into Haram Sharif or Dome of the Rock and making claims that Solomon Temple is under it and all these things going on to a final takeover of the area?
I think it's a hard question. I think it's two different paths because the archaeological work happens underground, under Silwan and under this area. For sure, it's also meant to strengthen the Jewish identity and the Jewish history. And I think the problem is that it comes on somebody else's account. I think definitely for many of the extreme settlers that go into Al-Aqsa regularly and to other places, they don't see any right for Muslim or Palestinian history or archaeology. So for sure, for them, it's important to erase it or to push it away.
What about the international community? For example, do you think that a big impetus in Israel's ongoing transgression of international law is the continual capitulation of international bodies to it? I mean, do you see any capitulation by the international community to kind of allow Israel to push its limits?
I think if we're talking generally, I think many people here on the ground accepted a much more harsh response from the US, but specifically from European countries to what's happening now, because for years, people here, but also from the international community, has been warning for what is happening. You have the most extreme right-wing government that has ever been, with a convicted terrorist as the Minister of Internal Security, and basically Israeli extreme settlers controlling the government and leading the policy. And we're still not seeing a clear response from international bodies or from the international communities. We do see some pressure on specific areas like Khan el-Ahmar, a community near Jerusalem that Israel wants to displace and evict, and it didn't happen because of international pressure. But in my opinion, we haven't seen the international community putting full pressure over Israel in all the subjects and the matters. And I think maybe it happens because people are so overwhelmed. The government is promoting so many things in so many different fronts at one time, so it's kind of hard to understand it. Although, as we said before, it has only one agenda: to push Palestinians out as much as possible. I think this conference does show that with the small protests and resistance we saw from archaeological community around the world, it was cancelled, although only one, but the main lecture was cancelled and there was some pushback. So I think it does prove there's still some power for Jewish community to act and to take action.
So is the new extreme government of Israel weaponizing archaeology to ethnically cleanse Palestinians of their land?
I think definitely, and unfortunately, I think it's something we would see an increase in with the attempts. If the Israeli Antique Authority takes over the archaeological work in the West Bank, or if the military, the civil administration is responsible for that, I think we will see ongoing attempt to use archaeology and to use historical narratives to take over land.
Oren Ziv, thank you for coming on Arab Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's the voice and the face of Oren Ziv regarding his recent article in 972 magazine discussing the backlash after a conference drops an Israeli archaeologist for his basically his academic work. It's an incredible story, Jamal, and you kind of led into the interview by talking about how the apartheid state leverages academics and academia and so-called research to fit the kind of biblical narrative of the apartheid state. You know, a lot of new wave historians and new wave archaeologists have gone against that narrative, and basically the evidence that they're uncovering, as Oren, and you discussed, goes against that biblical narrative in very severe ways. And what does the apartheid state do when they find that out?
It goes against it. This is we used one example, but the fact that they try to sneak in archaeologists from Ariel University. This is a settler university. This is a university built on Palestinian stolen land, and it is an understanding that you don't, call it code of ethics for archaeologists and anthropologists, not to go and dig into occupied territories or transfer antiquities from one place to the other place. And yet Israel tries to sneak in these archaeologists to make their presentation. Now, here's the interesting thing, because I know just that you've spoken at many conferences and universities. And when you speak, do you just show up as just Ghanem, or you have an affiliation? You are affiliated with UC San Francisco, right? UCSF. So when you have presenters, professors from various universities across the globe, some coming from California, they're coming from the United States, different universities in the United States, from England, from France, and so forth. Every single presenter has their name, Professor so-and-so or Dr. so-and-so from Oxford University, so-and-so from Harvard University. Then you have two names, just like out of misplaced without an affiliation, right? This is kind of how they got discovered. You just have two names presenting, happen to be Israeli names, no affiliation of whatsoever. And then you find out they come from a settler university. So
Yes.
that's basically the crux of the story.
It's a great story, Jamal, and it's part of the ongoing attempt to subvert, and to undermine academic research and the academy by doing things like that. It's a typical kind of apartheid ploy, Jamal, to try to sneak in, as you say, these views of these archaeologists. And it's not just a code of ethics. It goes against the very foundation of the Academy of Science, of Research, to do something like that. And I'll tell you, because I've been, as you said, I've been doing conferences for decades, Jamal, and I've never, ever, ever been to a conference where someone's affiliation was not attached to their name. It just goes without saying. So the obvious thing is that they were trying to hide that these two so-called archaeologists were from a settler colonial, university. I'm glad they got outed. That's great.
Yeah, they got outed, and then you find out that the main professor basically had studies done illegally, which should be done. It's illegally in the West Bank. Anyway, moving on to one of
Roger
our main
Waters.
stories. For those who don't know who's Roger Waters, just think about Pink Floyd. He's the founder of
one of the founders, yeah,
of the Pink Floyd, and he's also the creative force behind the band's biggest albums.
Right.
And aside of this, in addition to this, I should say, he's a big supporter for the independence of Palestine. Huge supporter for the BDS, or boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Spoken many times on this issue, outspoken, and he has been a subject of Israeli attacks and attacks by AIPAC, and attacks in the UK by the Israel lobby in the UK and other places. But I have not seen this much a vicious and orchestrated attack as the one that we've been witnessing for the past month. I mean, he's been, he has a thick skin, I would say, because, many artists have been speaking on behalf of Palestinians, defending Palestinians, and some can easily get intimidated, Well, I shouldn't go, that's off topic, just like we've seen with Kennedy, praising Roger Waters, right, for his stance, and then basically throwing him under the bus.
That's exactly right.
And after he said, I didn't know about his views on Israel. That's a whole different topic. But he's one of those artists who has thick skin, and he's not scared, and he has sustained multiple attacks. And the campaign that we're seeing is a campaign trying to cancel him.
Well, that's right, Jamal. And I think, it kind of started with Roger Waters. And I think maybe our listeners and viewers don't know this, but he was giving a concert in Berlin. And as part of his show, he wore an old German army uniform, and that set off, from World War II, kind of a Nazi uniform, actually. And that just made people go crazy. Now, he had the artistic freedom, given the show that he was doing in Berlin, talking about basically the breakdown of the Nazi experience and kind of the emergence of freedom in Berlin, and the breakdown of the Berlin Wall and all that, which, his infamous songs from Pink Floyd are connected to. So, given the artistic freedom that he's always enjoyed and kind of played to, he gave this show. The pro-Israel lobbies just went, they had seizures, Jamal. It was unbelievable how much they attacked him for this. And they didn't cancel the concerts. The concerts continue.
Well, let me just say something. This is not the first time that he has worn this uniform. And by the way, this is not a Nazi uniform. It looks like a Nazi uniform, but he's trying to portray a dictator, like, fascist,
dictator.
basically,
Yeah,
a fascist.
any dictator.
And he has done that in the past. This is his
Right.
message against fascism and authoritarianism
and dictatorships.
and dictatorship.
Right.
So that, I think this is not the issue. This is part of the issue. They try to connect that and
they're trying to connect it, exactly,
and say that
exactly.
he wore a Nazi uniform. The issue was he also had in this recent concert that he did in Frankfurt, which they tried to cancel, but unsuccessfully. They did not cancel it. And he had behind him portraits of victims of fascism, victims from different countries. One of the victims was Anne Frank, and that's basically sending a message to what happened in Germany. After all,
Right.
he was performing in Germany. And the other picture, which I think basically blew the lid off those, anti-Palestine group, was
Right.
the picture of Shireen Abu Akleh, who
That's right.
was murdered by a fascist regime, which is the apartheid state of Israel. So he was trying to make this connection. Anne Frank, Shireen Abu Akleh, others, bunch of them. And I think that was the trigger, because he put the picture of Shireen Abu Akleh. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, here is an American journalist who was murdered by a fascist regime. And up till now, they haven't taken responsibility except saying, oh, yeah, I think one of our soldiers killed her. And then, of course, others. And after that, immediately after that, I mean, they've been trying, I have to say, before every time he tours, he just finished basically his European tour, going from Germany to Spain and so forth, and now back into the UK. He has, number one, Jess, sold out concerts. Okay?
Every concert sold out, Jamal.
Every time they try to discourage people from going to his concerts, he has sold out concerts.
Well,
successfully try to have Frankfurt, the city of Frankfurt, cancel his concert, and guess what? And that's why I said he doesn't put up with their BS. He sued. They tried to cancel it. He sued
and won.
And he won. And so he performed in Frankfurt again, full house in Frankfurt.
This goes. I think I have to say this again, Jamal. We have to thank the Zionists and the Israeli apologists, because yet again they never miss an opportunity to overplay their hand. Unwittingly, they have just strengthened Roger Waters' commitment to justice and to pro-Palestinian freedom and self-determination. The man has never missed an opportunity to speak for freedom and justice, and not just for Palestinians, Jamal. He's an anti-fascist. He's
anti-war. He's against the war. Okay, so here's another thing. He's against the war in Ukraine. He does not want the United States and the UK sending weapons to prolong the war in the Ukraine. Guess what AIPAC and their surrogates wrote about him? That he is a Putin apologist. This is how they spin things. They spin.
But they blow it, Jamal. You know that, because his concerts are not only sold out, but his international acclaim and respect, and people who just not only want to hear his music, but buy his music, is just, he's basically one of the people that's at the top of the charts throughout Europe. Not so much in the United States, but definitely in Europe and other parts of the world. He's internationally acclaimed. They blew it again, Jamal. That's basically what I'm saying. The Israeli apologists are actually bringing more attention to Roger Waters and his message.
Well, I guess at the end of the day, they're unable to silence him. He won't. And he wrote, put out a statement and said, "I will not be canceled." This is basically his message to them and other things. And in a sad way, They have been trying to do the same thing to him, where they've won, in my opinion, initially by canceling the labor leader Corbyn, if you recall.
Right.
And they think that he's someone like him. He's a wonderful guy, Corbyn, a nice guy, gentle guy, and they thought that maybe Roger Waters is just going to give up like him, and he's not.
No, Roger Waters is not going to give up. He's going to continue to give concerts. He's going to continue to be anti-fascist, anti-war, and he's going to continue to advocate for freedom and self-determination for Palestinians. That's never going to stop, Jamal. And we have to continue to follow this message. But talk about cancel. What I would talk about the Israeli apologists, I would say fail. They, or loser. They lost and they failed yet again.
That's right. So moving on to our next story, Jess, which
very interesting.
That's very interesting. Surprising at this time that this came out. Actually, this came out earlier in March, but it didn't pick any traction because the author, the original, I guess, the person who discovered this archive material about Israel's collaboration with Nazi war criminals, recruiting them to become Mossad agents, wrote about it in March. And not until recently now, you have a new article that came out in Haaretz, basically, picking up on this story. And which is very surprising because Israel is viewed as a country, especially when you have all the coverage about the hunting Nazis and so forth.
Nazi hunters, right.
The Nazi hunters, to find out that actually Israel, from early on, going way back in the 60s, mid-60s and so forth, has recruited Nazi war criminals. One of them was known to be the inventor of those horrible gas carts, that they used to round up Jews and choke them to death. But he is the mastermind behind this. And then you find out about this, that he was working for the Mossad.
Well, Jamal, I guess you say you're surprised. I'm not surprised. What I'm surprised about is that they wrote about it. What I'm not surprised about is that there was a collaboration between the apartheid state and the Mossad agents in trying to recruit Nazi criminals. I'm not surprised about the fact that they did that, tried to do it, and did it successfully. I'm more surprised that this article was able to finally get published. Now, why did it take so long to pick up steam? And I have a question for you. I haven't seen this on CBS or CNN yet.
No, this is, and I should mention the professor is Professor Orbach. He's professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And he said that he had waited a long time for the documents. And then I'm quoting from here. He said, at first I tried to work through all kinds of people I knew in the organization, but it didn't help. Afterwards, I decided to try the most official way. I got in touch with the spokesperson's unit at the Prime Minister's office, to which the Mossad is accountable, and I waited for a reply. He writes about trying to confirm what he received basically in the mail.
Right.
And here you have these documents, intricate and intriguing documents detailing not once, it wasn't a one-off. It was more
an effort.
than
It was
once.
A plan. It was a project.
Basically recruiting, like I said, former Nazi criminals, war criminals, to work with them, to feed them information on Syria, to feed them information on Egypt.
Right. So what is the saying, Jamal? Birds of a feather flock together. So one war criminal trying to recruit another war criminal in the service of, the fascistic aim. So I guess, are we surprised in some ways?
I am surprised. I'm surprised because, like I said, there was the trial, the famous or infamous trial of Adolf Eichmann, And then to
Right.
find out that Alois Brunner, that's the name of the former Nazi turned to be a Mossad agent, was Adolf Eichmann's deputy.
Oh,
He was
that's
Adolf
that's
Eichmann's deputy. He fled
that's
the
big
war.
news.
He fled the war, and then he is responsible for multiple genocidal crimes. This is according to Orbach, who wrote, he was a solver of problems that arose during the deportation and was in charge of a systematic apparatus of hunting people, of plunder, and of transport to the camps. This is
Wow.
the person who was behind moving people into extermination, basically. And then yet he escaped, and then he was recruited by the Mossad.
Well, this is probably just the tip of the iceberg, Jamal, in terms of there's so much archival information that is yet to be, divulged by the apartheid state. I mean, we know about the new historians and what they've been able to uncover in terms of the concerted effort to kind of, ethnically cleanse and transfer indigenous Palestinian populations, the so-called Plan Dalit and all the things around that. I suspect that there's a lot more in these archives that will come out over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's why I said, like you said, it's the tip of the iceberg. And to what extent they have used them, and why was
Right.
this cover
Right.
up? I mean, that was when you didn't have social media and you barely
Right.
had black and
Right.
white TV.
Right.
The Eichmann story, everyone knew about the Eichmann story and his trial, watched all over the world in newsreels, etc. But then, while they're doing that, they were
They're recruiting
sentencing
his deputy.
Eichmann to death. They've recruited his deputy who was working for them.
I guess more to come on that story, Jamal. It's a big story, and I'm sure we'll be covering and following the fallout from that. I'm waiting for CNN, CBS, and the mainstream media to pick that up.
Oh, yeah. Keep waiting, Jess. Well, you've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.